Welcome to everybody. My name is Luca, and I do have the pleasure to introduce you to our plan. So, as you all know, the session will be on Navident version 2.2. The version that will be released by Claronav, and this version contains so many features and so many outstanding capabilities that I'm really keen and excited to be able to share with you guys today. So the event is going to be registered, so there will be people who won't make it for the live session that will enjoy the registration of this event. For the lucky of you who made it, you do have the opportunity to write your questions on the chat. So the idea, and that's the rule of the house, is that I will make the presentation, and I mute all of you, so you won't be able to communicate with me if not by writing up on the chat. And I will be addressing and answering all questions which I'll be reading on the chat. So my suggestion, if you do have any question, write up on the chat, and I will address each individual question soon after the presentation. This event is not necessarily related to users, and we opened up to both users and not users. So I thought would have been a good idea to spend just a couple of words on what we're talking about. We're talking about dynamic navigation. We're talking about Navident, what it's all about. It's basically, it's comparable to GPS technology. As we are all aware, thanks to satellites, we can look at our smartphone maps and basically understand where we are and what is the best way to reach what we want to reach. And that idea, it's really intertwined with Navident, because equally, what Navident, dynamic navigation, does, it tracks motion. It's a motion tracking technology. It tracks the movement of the surgeon's hand and the movements of patient head. And all these movements, thanks to the software, are matched to the 3D, the CBCT of the patient, the 3D images of the patient. So the benefit of that is that you do have a real-time feedback of what you do as a surgeon on the patient. It's a quite telling an important feature. And that it's basically synthesized by Navident, as you can see, is a portable interoperatory inter-office device which allows surgeon to do, and to operate with a real-time feedback on what he does on the patient anatomy. So, having said that, and that was just a small introductory for the newcomers, for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to work and live and breathe with Navident. But the opportunity we have today is to present you with Navident 2.2. It's the new version, which is going to be released by the end of this month, and has so many features and so many benefits. As much that we won't be capable to address all of them today. So what we thought we thought to split this presentation in two. One will, of course, will take place today, and another one, second one, will take place in the short future. And the reason why we thought to split, it's easily given by the sheer amount of features that we are currently presenting. And I want to, first of all, list all of the 7 features that I will dwell on, and highlight what are the key takeaways, the key success factors for each individual feature. First of all, we're talking about the opportunity to add and import multiple STL. So we will dwell on this feature. We will see that thanks to it, we do have a chance to register to the same CBCT dataset multiple STL files. And I will provide you with an example how to achieve that by importing the upper scan, the lower scan, and the byte scan, and registering all together. And of course, what is the benefit of doing that? It's to facilitate prosthetic planning. So that feature has been conceived and put in place to really facilitate prosthetic-driven planning. Then the other feature which I dwell upon is the STL-Trace Registration. For those who are not familiar with Navident, one of the key features of Navident from a technical standpoint is the opportunity to register the anatomy of the patient without having the patient wearing any marker at the time of the CBCT, but being capable to register the data set and the anatomy of the patient straight on the software. We're doing that by the means of a protocol which we call trace and place. Then one of the key features that we're introducing with the new version 2.2 is the opportunity to obtain registration not only with the DICOM dataset, but also by importing and matching the STL file. So those cases where the scatter is significant and the artifacts hinders the opportunity to trace patient's crown because of the metallic of the restoration. In those cases, when the artifact it's king, then tracing the patient tooth and matching the tracing of the patient tooth with the 3D rendering of the DICOM dataset, it's really problematic. One opportunity, and this is the opportunity that we are introducing with this feature, is that we can import the STL of the pontic of the restoration of the patient, and then we can match that into the DICOM dataset. So this is a very interesting element that we will add into our arsenal. Then I will talk about some improved implant planning functionalities. We will talk about locking a planned virtual implant in order to prevent any accidental change. We will be talking about grouping several implants together to move or apply changes simultaneously to those implants. and then also copying one virtual implant property into another virtual implant. So we're going to have a chance to really dig a bit further on that element as well. What we're going to be talking as well, we will talk as well about the opportunity with the version 2.2 of angulating implants on some weird angles. So for those who are using Navident in endo, for example, and they need to do, some apicoectomies or activities that is linked to angulation, which are higher than the standard vertical position of implants, they will enjoy this feature very much. And that's something, again, we will dwell upon. Of course, we will introduce also the topic of an improved Evalunav. Evalunav, it's the software which is into the Navident ecosystem. And it's a software which enables users to compare a CBCT post-op CBCT with a pre-op CBCT in order to assess how accurate the implant placement was during the surgery. Well, this ecosystem, the Evalunav software, has been improved and has been simplified, and therefore is very simple now. It's very easy and intuitive, the process of matching the whole thing together. Then we will talk about another important feature which is introduced, which is adding a saw cutting plane. We do have a chance when working with the piezo by using a Navident 2.2 to introduce a cutting plane, to draw a cutting plane, and to follow that cutting plane using a piezo handpiece. And we will see where and how that feature is going to be useful for you guys working on Navident. Then we will present a protocol which is geared to completely edentulous jaws, a protocol which enables to overcome the existing protocol, which is using a mini implant placed before surgery, and that protocol we know, and we've been talking about it, and we already discussed that placing a mini implant before taking a CBCT might have represented some challenges, and in order to overcome those challenges, we will introduce this protocol of screw-fiducial registration, which are placed either on the patient in terms of fixing the screws on the patient jaw, or using what we call a Navibite. And again, that takes place while before, soon after, soon before the patient scanning, but with a protocol which really has put off any problem or any difficulty for both the surgeon and the patient. So because of the sheer amount of the new features, as I mentioned before, we will split this presentation in twos, and I will dwell first on the first 5 items, and I will leave the 6th and the 7th item for a second go-to-meeting session. So we will have a chance either to get together again live, like we're doing now, or for those who won't be capable to do it a second time, of course, we're going to register the 6th and the 7th item, presenting them, and then, of course, allowing everybody to enjoy and understand the benefits of these two last items. So we will focus, therefore, on the first 5 items of changes. So let's start then with the first, which is a multiple STL importation. So that is you know, a thing that we are talking in the next few minutes, and explain how the whole thing will take place. So first of all, this is a quite familiar picture for those who are knowing and using a Navident. I will explain briefly for those who are newcomers for Navident. Basically, we do have a control panel on the left, then we do have 5 quadrants. When in those quadrants, we do have a 3D rendering of the CBCT, a panorex. We do have the actual view, the sagittal view, and the coronal view. Then on the control panel, we added this item, this button, which is the surface scans. And of course, we're talking about of surface scans and not surface scan, because we, as I said, added the facility to add multiple scans. So in order to activate that function, we need simply and purely to hit that you know, key. And by hitting that key, the software puts us into this domain. And this domain is pretty straightforward. We do have the 3D rendering of the patient. Then we do have a panorex of the patient. And also we do have the sagittal view of the panorex. So what we need to do next, as is shown by the slide, we need to import surface scan. And that, in a sense, is pretty similar to what we used to do. What we need to do by clicking that key, we need to identify the numbers of STL files we want to add. In this case, for example, let's assume that we want to add the upper jaw STL file. So what we do, then we click on that key, and we do import the upper jaw. And this is a very similar to what has been doing lately with the surface scan importation. So the same way applies here. What we do, and the only change is that we left click and we don't right click. In this case, we left click and we find minimum 3 points, which are well represented on both images, on the 3D rendering and on the STL file. And again, if we, by any chance, we make a mistake, again, with left click, we can erase the dot and we can redraw a dot on a different place. But the logic here is pretty straightforward. We basically identify minimum of 3 points, which of course can be more if we want to keep clicking on the patient anatomy, but we need to identify a minimum of 3 points in order to obtain what we can see in this image, which is the matching of the STL file on the DICOM dataset. And as you can see on the right quadrant, the bottom right quadrant, we can scan the matching that has been carried out by our 3 points and by the software, and eventually amend it, add in other points if it's necessary, or simply and purely going on by importing further STL files. And this is at the button and the key that allows to do that. And by doing that, we do have a chance to get into a different domain, and this is the ambience where we are actually landing by clicking, adding the byte scan, which allows us to add, as we can see in this case, the lower STL file, and also the byte occlusion of the upper and the lower. So once we got the three STL file showing off on this ambient, what we need to do, and already we know by experience, we need to identify 3 points which are, mutually present on the upper jaw STL and the byte occlusion byte STL. And by doing that, in this case, it's very simple because we can identify the cusps of these teeth. So once we matched the upper and the byte, you will see on the right quadrant, the bottom right quadrant, that we actually succeed in merging the STL file of the upper jaw STL file with the byte STL. We can see the green predominating in this matching. So what we need, we are left to do the same with the lower jaw STL file. Equally, in this case, what we need to do is to pinpoint 3 points. In this case, as you can see, we cannot identify the cusps because of the occlusion. So in this case, we will find the margin, the gingival marginal point that we can pinpoint on both STL file. Once we carry it out with this, we will succeed in getting the quality of the matching, which is shown by the predominant green color out of the red color of that we can see on the right lower right quadrant, showing that the matching has been carried out properly. If not, we could have added other points in order to still get to the same end result, which is appropriate matching of the STL file. So once we've done that, what we need to do is then, click on Save, and by clicking on Save, we get back to our, standard quadrants, where in this case we can succeedingly see not only the 3D rendering of the patient, but we can also see the upper and lower STL file. So the other feature, which is very helpful indeed, if we can then click on the icon of the STL file that we can find on each quadrant, lower quadrants, it's we can start coloring the surface of the STL files. In this case, it's called surface number 1, and we can edit the color of this surface. And by clicking, of course, edit color, we can choose whatever color we think it's more appropriate in order to differentiate upper and lower STL file. Not only that, but we do have a chance, of course, to color as well the lower jaw. And in fact, we do have a chance also to toggle the visibility of the upper and the lower jaw. As you see on this option, there's a toggle visibility for all. It means that we can, turn on or turn off the STL file altogether, or we can toggle the visibility of surface number 1, or we can toggle visibility of surface number 2. So, and that's basically a key advantage of the system, which allows us, to really play on the different STL files that we can see on these pictures being of two different colors. So, and if we need at the end of this exercise to remove the STL file because of whatever reason, again, we do have a pop-up menu that we can click on, and it's triggered by clicking on this small triangle that we can find on the flank of the surface scans key. By activating this pop-up menu, we can again remove all STL file that we've been imported. So this is basically is the end of this feature, which is again I recap in few seconds, allows us to import multiple STL files, toggle them, and get in this valid help in planning a prosthetic driven surgery. So that is as I said, is the end of the first feature. We do have a second feature which is equally interesting, which is we said is the STL-Trace Registration. The STL-Trace Registration, as I said, we do already, we are very familiar since almost one year now that with the idea of tracing. In other words, we are familiar with the idea that instead of having a patient with a CT marker on the time of the CBCT, we do have a chance to work on a standard CBCT and then register patient anatomy after the CBCT. It's quite compelling as a proposition, because it allows us, first of all, to reduce the number of CBCTs on the patient, or even more, eventually to use the patient CBCTs, which has already been taken from a third-party radiologic center, and start working on that CBCT with Navident, with dynamic navigation. And we could achieve that by the means of tracing, by introducing what we call a tracer, which is nothing more than a contact scan tracer, which allows us to contour the surface of minimum 3 teeth, and therefore generating a mesh, a 3D mesh, which the software matches with the 3D rendering of the patient. That logic, which is quite compelling, quite effective, might encounter some difficulties if we do have patients with artifacts because of the prosthesis. There's a metallic in the prosthesis, and that metallic create and generates some artifacts. And we can see here a picture which shows a case where we can see both on the right side, but also on the left side, there is artifact. And by the way, of course, the missing teeth are the central teeth. So in this case, performing a standard tracing, which means contouring 3 available teeth, and then allowing the software to do the matching of the 3D mesh with the 3D rendering, can be a challenge. So in that case, the situation, it's the possibility we have introduced is to do a tracing using the STL matching. And again, this is a very familiar picture for those who know, and use Navident. But again, we do have a 3D rendering on the top left quadrant. Then we do have 2D views, which is the panorex, the axial view, the sagittal, and the coronal view. And then you can see by looking at the sagittal view, you can see the artifacts here, and how it negatively affects the opportunity to draw, a valid information for that single crown. So how we can tackle that issue? We can tackle the issue, and again, this is equally quite, compelling picture of what we're talking about in terms of artifacts and scatters, and how it hinders the possibility to draw a significant amount of data from the single crown. So what we do first of all use a tracer. So this is a tracer, which is nothing more than a contact scanner, which has a probe. You see, there's a tool with a probe, a round-shaped probe, which we can use to contour surfaces. And as we said, we can contour crown surfaces, and get the matching and get the registration. But in order to do that, we need also to have what we call a caliber, and this is something that we introduced as well. So some of us are quite familiar with it by now. But what we're talking about a metallic tool, which is very helpful to communicate with the software which kind of tool we are using on the specific time. And you can see there's a certain amount of numbers. You can see now here number 2, number 3, and number 4. Those numbers hint to the type of tool that we're going to be using. For example, when we do have drills, when we do have tips, when we do have tracer tools tip, we're going to be using this number 2, which has a dimple, where we're going to lay down our tip in order to communicate with the software and let him know the type of tool we are currently using. While number 3, it's used for calibration of a piezo handpiece. And number 4, it's used for calibrating the axis of a turbine, not a contrangle, but high-speed turbine. So, and this is again the other view of this caliber, the metallic caliber, and it's metallic because we're gonna autoclave it, and so it's autoclavable and can stay sterile on the mayo table. And you see, besides number 2, number 3, and 4, we do have also other numbers, 1L and 1R, which are used if you are left-handed or right-handed to calibrate the axis of a contrangle. So you put the chuck of your contrangle into the peg, and then you make a twist of a quarter of a circle in order to allow the software to know that you're using a specific contrangle. As you know, the philosophy of Navident is use a universal adapter, which allows you to place and allows you to use the dynamic navigation concept over a broad gamut of tool. Not only contrangles, but we said turbine, we said the piezo handpiece, we said straight handpiece. So in order to provide the exact information of which type of tool you are currently using, then the caliber, the metallic caliber, becomes an essential tool of communication to the software. So, but we opened a bracket here. We want to go back to tracing, and we know that, and we said that if we are going to trace, in other words, if you're going to use a tracer in order to contour an item, you need to first place the tracer probe into the dimple, allowing the software, allowing the Navident to understand that you're going to be from now onward, you're going to be tracing. That is the option that opens up to you. So, and this is exactly what we're talking about. You see the surgeon here, in this case, we're talking about Dr. Luigi Vito Stefanelli, who is a master clinical trainer of Navident and is the current president of Dynamic Navigation Society, which under the aegis of which we're currently presenting this video. And I thank personally Dr. Luigi Vito Stefanelli for having given me the pictures I'm presenting you. But as you can see, him is now doing what we call a calibration of the tracer tip. And he does it by using the caliper. Once he has done that calibration, this is the interface, which is basically you work with, and the interface shows the STL of the upper jaw. And of course, the STL in this case has been built on is a digital walks-up, which has been put on a virtual articulator, has been designed by a lab and given to Dr. Stefanelli via email or via WeTransfer as a digital file. So what it does import the STL file, and once he calibrated the tracer, he starts, identifying points, and we know there's a limited amount of 3 points, and you can add as many points as you want, but you need to have a minimum of 3 points in order to get an item matched. So now he has identified the points. Now he starts using the tracer, having pinpointed the trigger point. Now he has the opportunity to draw a window of 100 points by contouring, in this case, the surface of the STL file, and he does it not only on one quadrant, he does it on the opposite quadrant, and he does it on as many points that he was to draw. And basically, once he reached 100, then he basically has for all points he has the opportunity to finish the activity, and that is basically the end result. He wants to do each time. He wants to perform accuracy check. You see, there's an accuracy check view open here, where he puts the probe of the tracer, and he touches any point, and he proves that there's a congruency between what it does, what it touches, and what he sees on the laptop screen. And you can see there's basically no difference whatsoever between the probe and the target surface, which shows is a 0.0 millimeter of difference, and that proves the accuracy of the whole exercise. And he can repeat this exercise also on basically on other points as well. So by having said that, that's in a sense ends the STL matching as an opportunity, and allows me to present. And I restate for those who actually had the necessity to join us only now, the opportunity to write up their questions on the chat. So you do have a chat on your control panel, and if you open that chat, you will see that there's a chance for you to write up any questions, and I will address each of them by the end of the presentation. So I'm asking you to mute yourself. I mute yourself. I will presenting you the features. You will write up the questions, and I will eventually address all of them by the end of my presentation. So I will dwell now on some aspect which I feel are equally useful in terms of novelties that has been introduced with version 2.2, and I'm referring to the implant planning. So implant planning, and again, For those of you who are new to Navident, it's pretty straightforward because we do have a chance, again, by looking at the control panel, to add an implant. As you can see, not only you can add a virtual crown, and we've seen before how to add an STL file, but you can add, of course, an implant. One of the novelty which has been introduced by version 2.2, it's that we added a property, a pop-up menu, by right-clicking on the implant. So now, by right-clicking on the implant that has been planned, you can have a set of options available. So we will dwell on those options and we'll investigate on each individual option available. So first of all, we will see that one option that you're going to have by looking at this pop-up menu, it's to lock the implant plan. So that, in a sense, might facilitate, and you see there's a lock showing off, which says that now you cannot, move. You're pretty happy about that position. You want to lock it. You don't want to risk that by accident that position changes. Then what you can do by right-clicking and getting the pop-up menu, you can lock that position in place. That's one feature. Then you do have a very important features, which is the properties. You want to specify properties for this implant. And what does it means? For example, you want to name that implant not after the number which are generated by the software, which are starting from 1 to whatever. You want to name according to the FDI nomenclature of this specific implant. And in this case, you want to add number 45. And therefore, you can see that now, from now onward, the implant is labeled number 45. Then you do have the opportunity to change either on the property panel length and diameter. And you can see you can change also the color of that implant. So all, by clicking on the properties. What you can do, you can copy that implant, and by copying that implant, you generate another implant. That's a copy of the second generated copied implant. And you can set that copied implant parallel, and again, by clicking on set parallel to, in this case, number 45. As you can see, you can generate some angulation which are consistent within your planning. Then you can group or ungroup implants together. You see, you can by clicking group ungroup, you can identify the available implants. In this case, you got 2 implants, number 45 and number 46. You can then move to grouped implants, and you can move from left to right. And now, and you can change eventually the color of these implants. And from now onward, you can move these 2 implants together. So now they are grouped together and they move together. And of course, you can do the opposite. You can ungroup the implants and you can start working individually, putting again the grouped implant and moving the implant that you want to ungroup on the left side of this pop-up menu, and therefore you get you get everything because of the situation of the implants. So that ends up the features on implant planning, and I feel that I've been really, and we're going to be very helpful for you guys using using and the ability of doing. And I want to introduce you with another option, which is available, which is the opportunity now to have high degrees of implant angulation. So this is a feature which is we do know that implants are usually planned vertically, or they do have an angle that usually it's below 45 degrees. But as we said, we opened up Navident to another host of potential users, which they might be willing to use the software for their endeavors, such as, for example, endodontists who might be interested in apicoectomies and might be interested in angulating the planning of these apicoectomies under angulations which are not the standard angulations of an implant. So another feature which has been brought on version 2.2, as you can see from these three snapshots, is that you can plan the implant in this case, or you can plan your drilling sequence by angulating this axis more than 45 degrees. And that's equally, as I said, an interesting features that is available. There is another feature which is basically equally interesting. It's related to Evalunav. And Evalunav, as I said at the beginning, but I repeated here for those who joined us now, is a software application which is in the Navident ecosystem. It's part of the Navident ecosystem, but it's a software per se, and allows the software to do import a post-operative CBCT and a planned CBCT. So you do have a chance within this environment to import the two data sets, the pre-op and the post-op CBCT. And what Evalunav enables you to do is to really match the post-op with the pre-op and quantify exactly the difference between implant placement and implant planning. This operation has been simplified and has been rendered in a very intuitive operation. And here I'm presenting you exactly with one picture. And the picture, again, I thank Dr. Luigi Vito Stefanelli for having landed this picture to me. I borrowed the picture from him, and the picture shows exactly what Evalunav, the endpoint of Evalunav is. As you can see, you see a 3D rendering of a jaw, and you see two pictures, yellow and red pictures. The yellow pictures, the yellow implant shape pictures, are the planned implants. And you can see that from the head of the yellow shape starts an axis, which is the implant axis, which has been according to the plan. Then you can see matched on top of that yellow shape, another shape, which is red, which has equally an axis. Then the red axis is basically the placed implant. So what has been really delivered to the patient. So the endpoint, you can really appreciate it on this quadrant here on the top left, because it quantifies the gap between the plan and the placed. And you see here, entry into the 0.49 millimeters, apex 3D 0.40 millimeters, apex in volume 40 millimeters, angle deviation 4.12 degrees. So what's the purpose of this exercise? Multifaceted, because of you do have the option on one side, if it's possible, to take a second CBCT from your own patient. You do have a chance really to understand the delivery of the placement, and really it's a tool which allows you to improve your learning curve, to understand the difference between what you've done compared to what you planned. So it's a great learning experience. Of course, if only if a second CBCT can be taken on that specific patient. But there's another set of options available, which is, of course, related to research, to literature. Most of the literature which has been produced lately has used, as you know, Mimics as a software. But this is, and you know, Mimics is a software which is considered a gold standard in the literature. And this software, which is a Evalunav, does exactly the same, but it's free. It's completely included into the ecosystem of Navident. So basically, it allows you to quantify on a certain amount of cases, having received the ethical approval for the piece of research that you are developing, the opportunity to really quantify the accuracy, not only for a single case, but for a certain amount of cases, allowing you to investigate the level of accuracy of this technique. And thanks to the piece of literature which has been published lately by a host of Navident users, we definitely have the evidence of the high level of accuracy related to the dynamic navigation approach, which is equally quite reassuring and quite compelling in this case. So this is basically the end of my first 5 items. As I said at the beginning, there are other 2 important items which are left, which I will dwell on a second, go-to-meeting conference, which are number 6 and number 7. Number 6 is to add saw cutting planes, and we will see how we can achieve that, and we will see also the important clinical applications available now by introducing a cutting plane. And then we will dwell as well on number 7, item number 7, which is introducing, I would say, revolutionary and amazing in terms of simplicity protocols for treating total edentulous patients, as opposed of using a mini implant, which has been the standard for total edentulous patient up to now. We will usher in an opportunity, which is dramatic in terms of a simplification, of using mini screws, or using what we call a Navibite with screws, to allow the registration of a total edentulous patient. Again, those 2 items will be object of a specific, conference call in the future. But now, by looking at my watch, I see that we've been talking about your questions, and I can read Dr. Boudget's question loud on behalf of everybody else. But my question is whether it will be possible to import an STL file generated by scanning implant scan bodies after the scan has been processed by the lab and the virtual implant analogous added into Evalunav using surface scan meshing but also seeing if you can assess position of placed implants without having to take a second CBCT scan. So that's a very important question, because of course we know that taking a second CBCT is not always possible. Has to be, it's very much specific to the case, or has to be approved by an ethical committee. So therefore, having an opportunity to match, improve accuracy, not by matching CBCT data sets, but to match STL file, that would be basically very helpful, because it could prove accuracy in a completely different domain, which is a domain which doesn't project any irradiation to the patient. So that would be a very important endeavor whatsoever. And then, well, yes, that's the purpose of the whole thing. Of course, as we can see from Dr. Bouget's question, this a very compelling statement, and we are, of course, in the position to introduce with Navident an option which wasn't existing before, which is adding multiple STL files, being capable to match those STL files together by using some references, which allows us to match multiple STL files. Because of what we've done, we've seen that by the explanation I gave, we've seen the opportunity to match the bite with the arch, but nothing forbids to eventually match some markers available on the STL files together. While, for example, we do not have teeth, or while we do want to add layer complexities, one on top of the other. So that is really the purpose and the intention of this feature. And of course, we need to document and demonstrate the feasibility of that. And I know that Dr. Bouget, Dr. Stefanelli, and other colleagues are working towards that direction. I know also Professor Volkan Harrison is working on applying that feature on smile design, because that is equally a quite compelling proposition. And the compelling proposition is to get the importation of the plan of the smile, and the opportunity to get that information compounded into Navident. So that's equally another application. And of course, right now there is no evidence. There's no conclusive evidence from a clinical standpoint that that can be achieved. But of course, that doesn't mean that cannot be achieved, and that it doesn't mean that the avenue for exploration and for research is open and ripe to get to that level of understanding. So I do have another question here. Will Evalunav be available to check accuracy of piezo excision corticectomies? And again, of course, yes. The question is, we do have the chance to do matching. In this case, we do have corticectomies, and therefore we do have a plan corticectomies. And we do have another area, which is a black area, which is the end result of a corticectomy. So basically, are we able to match the plan with an area of the CBCT? In this case, is black. It's radiotranslucent because we took the bone out of the jaw. What is it? The question is, yes, I mean, that opportunity is there. Nobody has conclusively demonstrated that. That opens up, usher in another opportunity of investigation, which I think it's worth exploring, because of, again, this is a the corticectomy carried out by using a piezo is another quite important achievement for the patient. And if we can not only do that, because we already know for sure that we can achieve it using Navident, because Navident enables piezo activity, but if you can also do it from an assessment standpoint, that would be equally important, because it will enable us to get to a level that we can improve the surgeries up to a level which is most satisfactory for the patient, which we know is ultimately the beneficiary of the surgery and our endeavors. So that is the question. And I do have another question by Dr. Bara. He asked, do you think that in the actual situation to work with Navident can be decreases the risk for infection or transmission of a COVID, less surgery, indirect vision? Thanks, Dr. Bara, for this, because I think it's a fait accompli, because it's a fait accompli in the sense that dynamic navigation is going to command great attention by the surgeons based on the COVID situation, because of the intrinsic philosophy of dynamic navigation. The intrinsic philosophy is the one-day dentistry, the fact that you can do more on the patient. And we know that now the chances to dilute treatment on different sessions will be challenged, and surgeons will be forced to do more on the patient with less visits. And of course, the idea of Navident, it's there because you do have a chance to do the CBCT, to plan and to the surgery, but also the activity of the surgery per se. It's very, safe from, an infection or a risk of infection standpoint, because you do work by looking at a laptop screen and don't immersing yourself on the patient mouth. So it's equally, and you are 12 hours compared to the patient. So equally quite helpful position in order to stave off any risk of infection. And equally, as we can, as you've seen, that we introduced a caliber, which is a very essential tool to communicate with the software, which is a metallic, and that metallic allows to be autoclaved, and therefore allows it to get it sterilized and use it as a sterilized tool to calibrate the drills, to calibrate tips, to calibrate implants, and therefore guaranteeing the level of asepsis and sterilization which is required by the nature of a surgical treatment. So thanks, Dr. Bara, for this question, because it's more a question, it's more an observation. Thanks a lot. So I don't see any further question, and I look at my watch. We spent 1 hour a flyover for me, and I hope hopefully also for you, because I'm very excited about these new features, and I'm looking forward to a second conference call, which will help to share with you guys how a cutting plane and how two successful and compelling protocols have been introduced to treat total edentulous patient. So having said that, I'm just thank you for you guys being here live on this session, and I also thank those who will be listening to this session registered home. And I wish you all the best, and of course, all the big fan of using a dynamic navigation and using Navident. All the best, and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.